accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron Rumsey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Welcome, everyone, to the podcast of OA, episode number 149. I'm your co-host, Myron Rumsey, joined by our good friend, Phil Bova. Phil, we've got a lot to talk about this episode.
Yeah, there's a lot been going on. A lot of rumors, a lot of things flying around, and things coming to an end and new beginnings starting soon, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting. We're going to talk a little bit about New York Comic Con and some of the Green Lantern stuff that was shown there. Nothing really new there, but some new pictures and things of items that are coming out. And then the big news about DC's big timeline project, where Dan Didio revealed some of it, but it's been kind of blurred out. But fans have been doing a great job of piecing things together, and so I want to talk a little bit about the 4 generations of books that they talk about and what that might mean for DC Comics coming down the road, because there's some big rumors flying out there right now. And plus we got this fantastic conclusion to season 1 of the Green Lantern, which I'm really excited about.
I love it. Yeah, it was a great issue.
So, I want to jump right into it. So let's pause for a quick second and play either a promo from another podcast or something, and we'll come back and let's jump right into Green Lantern number 12.
Excellent.
This is Razor, and you are listening to the blog of OA. You need to keep listening, otherwise I will track you down with all of my skill, and you will feel my wrath.
All right, Myron. Welcome back, everybody. Here we are, the last issue of Green Lantern Year 1, the final conclusion. What'd you think, Myron?
I thought it was really fantastic. I understand why some people might not be as enthused about it as maybe you and I are, primarily because you don't have a real conclusion to this first arc. It kind of ends with a shadow of mystery, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I agree.
But, that aside, it's interesting. One of the things that I chose to do is I chose to go back and reread the entire first season so that I could really get a good idea of some of the things I might have missed the first time around. And I think that helped the reading experience, because there are things from all 11 previous issues that kind of get pulled into here. I mean, you see the return of the Super Watch, and you see some characters show back up again. I mean, I think pretty much all the major players have shown back up. I mean, even the Green Lantern that showed up in the very first issue. What was his name? Oh gosh,
not true, is it?
Not true.
Is it?
No. It's going to come to me in just a second. I know it is Maxim Tox.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Him.
He was supposedly killed in that very first issue, and you see him back amongst the living here. But like I said, it goes all the way back. And when you get to the mystery and you find out who that traitor is, because you remember the whole thing started with the Guardian telling Hal that there's a traitor in the midst.
Uh-huh.
And it kind of been hinted, the way that Chrysalon was acting kind of made you think it was him. And it was him, but it wasn't.
But it's funny you called that. I remember episodes back when you had made mention of the fact that he was a traitor, or he was the mole.
Yeah, I thought that Grant was kind of upfront about it, but then to find out that it was the Durlan, and that Durlan appeared in the second issue, that was what caught me.
Okay, so the minute I saw, and I remember the reference to the Durlan or whatnot, but the minute I saw it was Chrysalon, at first or whatnot, I was like, oh, I'll be damned, Myron was right about that.
But yeah, the fact that it was the Durlan way back from the second issue, back from the second issue. I think his name was Ziggle. Her name was Ziggle. Was one of the 3 Black Stars that was there freeing Evil Star from the Obsidian Depths. And after that, they kind of took Ziggle off the page, and nobody really noticed because the character didn't make a huge impact. but there in the background was this character that ends up being the traitor. And I thought that was good storytelling. It surprised me, but it didn't surprise me. So that was really cool.
Now, let me ask you this. When you did your read through, when you went back and did it all through, did you find, were all the plot holes filled in?
I don't know if I'd say that, but I think it kind of did a lot of good things to tie some of those things up. One of the things that I did question going into this is we knew that at the end of the last issue, Hal had 15 minutes to live.
Right.
And according to the countdown, this takes place 10 minutes later. And I'm thinking, well, Hal was with, the Guardians of the Multiverse. How come they're not with him now in this final bit? So I was scratching my head for a little bit. And then, when you get to the scene where, let me just flip through a little bit. There's a scene where you hear the Guardians talking, and the Guardians are talking about Controller Mu's endgame. And then they talk about, they have their own endgame. And the one Guardian says, well, I explained to him, for the first time in your life, we need you to do exactly as you're told. The rest, Lantern Jordan, the rest will be up to you. And my thought was, well, maybe that's the point. Maybe Hal's supposed to go into it alone because the Guardians' endgame has something to do with Hal doing exactly what happens.
Or maybe he's being implanted.
Right. Yeah, we don't really know. And at first I thought it was a plot hole, and I thought, well, wait a minute. Maybe it's not a plot hole. Maybe this is an intentional choice that Hal had them stay behind because Hal wants to go one-on-one with the Qwa-Man, and Hal wants to get to that point. Maybe I'm wrong, but I kind of feel that way. After I got to that point, I thought, well, Grant Morrison wouldn't throw that in without a reason. So right. I'm kind of left thinking that this is the Gambit. The Gambit is basically the Guardians have put all their chips on the table and they've bet everything on Hal Jordan. That's how I'm looking at it.
Which is usually the case, because everybody bets on the man.
Yeah, and so I thought that was interesting. And the battle between Hal and the Qwa-Man is just a brutal fight. I don't think we've seen something like that in quite a while, other than maybe the fight between Guy Gardner and Arkillo.
Yeah, that was a brutal one.
Right. So I thought it was really a great issue. Like I said, everything you kind of see everything come back into this again. And one of the things I really have to shout out is Liam Sharp, because once again, this guy this book looks so good. And an observation I made when I was reading through this thing from beginning to end was, you know how, and this is not a dig on previous creative teams in the books, but there've been a lot of splash pages over the years. And I think one of the things that happens with splash pages is because there's an overabundance of them, they kind of lose their impact. And if you look at this,
they become overused.
Right. So when they happen, they don't have the, you don't realize something big is going on because they're so frequent.
Right.
And when you look at this series, when you look at these first 12 issues, the only time you've seen full page splashes is in the first issue and this issue.
But I think, and that's a good point. But I'd also add that I think Sharp has an uncanny ability to do these panel breaks. You know what I mean? So whereas he may throw a splash in every grade so often, each page of his, the way he sets up his panels is a unique format. Even when he goes into the bleed zone, but there's no panels.
Yeah, his page layout design is off the wall.
Right.
And I loved how understated it was not to have those big splash pages, because when you do see them, then it actually means something.
Yeah, and that's what that's what always drew my attention to a book, was when it was a splash page that you didn't see coming. Not one that you knew, well, gosh, I'm seeing a lot of splash pages, like you said. But I would agree with you. I think it is overused a lot. I read a lot of other comic books, and I see it a lot in those.
I thought it was interesting, too, that the first double page spread was that image of Hal lying there and kind of looking up into the stars. And I'm assuming he was seemingly at peace. The whole image kind of reeked calmness. And when you get to this page, it's the exact opposite of that. And I thought, what a neat contrast to see these two things bookend this 12 issue story. If you looked at those two images, what a difference.
Yeah, that's a good point. It seems like they came full circle with this particular issue, just to tie up all loose ends in order to usher in on the next, obviously the next travels. Well, the 3-issue arc that.
Right.
What are they calling it? Like the 3-issue bridge?
Yeah. I mean, they're calling it Green Lantern Black Stars, but they're not really talking about how it fits. It'll be interesting to see how that fits in terms of collected editions too, because 3 is a little short for a trade paperback or a hardcover.
Yeah. I'd like to see it. I mean, what I'd like to see eventually happen is for the Green Lantern Corps to become involved somehow. And I would assume that going into year 2 after the Black Stars event, it's going to maybe lead up to that. What do you think?
I don't know. There was rumor flying around that Donny Cates was being lured to DC Comics, and one of the books that they teased him with to try to lure him over was a Green Lantern Corps book. So I don't think DC's uninterested, but then after hearing some of the stuff out of New York Comic Con, I'm not sure what their vision is for Green Lantern right now. But we'll get into that a while later. But
okay.
I think that I think I'd like to see the Green Lantern Corps. I mean, we see members here, the alien parts of it. We don't see the other human characters so much. And there's a part of me that's okay with that, to be honest. One of the things that I found in rereading this was I didn't realize how much I missed the whole Hal being a stranger in a strange land kind of thing, and that he's the sole human among them. That's something that's been lost over the years. And I really kind of grew a new appreciation for revisiting that whole era where it was Hal and a bunch of aliens. And I'm kind of digging it, to be honest.
That's a good point. I mean, I hadn't really considered it and looked at it through that type of lens, but you're kind of right. I mean, a lot of times it does get bogged down when he's back on Earth or always on Oa. But I mean, the way this one was played out with this 12 issues, I mean, it was also kind of like a journey into himself too. I mean, because when's the last time Hal Jordan just did for him instead of doing for the greater good? It seemed like a lot of his writing in this one was more just about Hal Jordan and his character, and that's what I think the central focus was. I mean, other than the plots and obviously the build up to something bigger or whatnot, but it just seemed like there was a lot of inflection for Hal Jordan in these issues.
Yeah, I agree. There were some good character moments in this first 12 issues. One of the things that I really had a good time with here was this version of Sinestro.
Yeah, he's quirky, but it's kind of funny with his humor. I mean, this the way he passes off his humor, like that's suave, mustachioed upstart.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of the original David Niven version of Sinestro.
And that's probably where Grant Morrison drew his inspiration from.
I thought it was kind of funny that, he's supposed to be the good guy, but he's not really a good guy, but he's a kind of guy who will do whatever it is for money. And it's funny that he gets paid to release the Qwa-Man, and now they're paying him to bring him back. He's playing both sides of the coin, which is kind of which I like. I like this version of him, and I'm hoping he's not gone after what happens in this issue.
No, I'd like to see him come back. I like what he says. Good guy Sinestro. He goes, I don't know if I'd go that far, dear boy. lovable rogue at best.
Absolutely. And what I thought was clever about it, and maybe I'm using the word clever a little too strongly, but one of the things I liked about it was the fact that this allowed Grant Morrison and Liam Sharp to play with Sinestro without doing anything to the more modern reimagined air quote space Hitler that Jeff Johns re-envisioned him as. So you leave that version intact, but yet you get your own play version of him anyway.
Right. Well, and it's the antimatter universe, so it's anything the antithesis of Thal Sinestro and the other side, I guess. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm really looking forward to what they're going to do. This really made me excited. The Miracle Machine thing, didn't catch me by surprise. I know we talked about it back when we started seeing the components, and I think Grant Morrison wasn't trying to keep it a secret. I think it was out there for anybody who had been reading his stuff along would know what's happening. I don't think there was any attempt to try to be some big secret, but for people that didn't know what was going on, there's the revelation that it's the Miracle Machine. But what I thought was so cool was, we saw the Miracle Machine used in Final Crisis, but that usage of the Miracle Machine was far into the future when Superman used it. So here you kind of see the origin of the Miracle Machine, the book written after the time that it was used the first time, if that makes sense. I mean, it almost makes you get a headache.
Yeah. But the comic book universe is anything but malleable,
You're right.
I mean, you kind of just got to bend the fiction just a little bit further just to make the points more relevant.
I just thought it was neat that this whole thing was that Moo was trying to get Hal to the point where Hal would have nothing left to do but wish Moo's dream into the Miracle Machine. And I thought it was twisted because when you think about the Miracle Machine, it's a weaponized weapon of mass destruction based on willpower in the wrong hands. And the entire Green Lantern mythology is based on using willpower for good. So I thought, what a perversion of what the Green Lanterns stand for by making the Miracle Machine and then forcing a Green Lantern to use it to rewrite all of reality. And then you start thinking about, well, what was Hal's name as Black Star? Parallax. So what's happening? Parallax is rewriting history again. I thought, what a neat parallel of what has happened in the past.
It is. It's kind of like a Flash story.
Kind of.
Flash does a lot of those kind of, I usually call them, I don't know if this is the right term for it, time inflections, to where they go back and forth a lot, or where time catches up with one another. Like there was one arc where he went into the future and he ran into his, I think it was his older self. And it was kind of a neat storyline, but it was the first time I've ever read it as a Flash fan. But then he ended up coming back, and then lo and behold, later on, the timeline ended up catching up with itself. It was just kind of neat. I like the play on Hal Jordan like that too.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of a neat wink, wink, nudge, nudge to what has happened before. And then the part that caught me at the end, we know that Hal makes the wish, and that's got to be what leads into Green Lantern Black Star. But then at the end, there is that 4 pages or so at the end of the antimatter weaponeers. And you see Hal there again, a different version of Hal, and you see. I thought it was really cool to see all the text in reverse. That was cool, but you see all those things in the epilogue that lead you to believe this must be for season 2.
Yeah, so I guess that would be. Is that a yellow Power Lantern?
Yeah, and the lantern's being put back in his chest because back in that first issue when Moo got his hands on the Qwa-Man, or the antimatter version of Hal, they removed that power battery because that's what they used to help start building the Miracle Machine with.
Sure.
So is this after everything happens and they come back to this timeline? I'm assuming that this is meant for season 2 because that's really what they're talking about here is season 2. And you see on that last page, you see versions of Trilla True and Chrysalon and some of these characters, and it looks like a version of Volk done as Weaponeers. So you're seeing the Green Lanterns we've seen in season 1 as Weaponeers in season 2.
That's really cool. That last panel is really, really neat. The detail on the characterization is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, just the faces are just amazing.
So I overall really enjoyed the first season. And for folks that were maybe on the fence or didn't enjoy it as much, my suggestion is to read it in its entirety. I know it's a long read. It's 12 issues, but I think you do get more out of it when you read it in its entirety because there are subtle details. And after you read that last issue, it's almost worth going back and looking back to find out how all these pieces come together because it is very cohesive when all things are said and done. All the dots are connected.
Well, more often than not, like you and I have always talked about it. Like I read this issue probably 3 times, and I find myself doing that with like a lot of these issues this whole entire first year that they've been coming out. And, we've mentioned that many, many times before. And I'm kind of wondering, would it be like, well, okay, so if I didn't read them, which wouldn't do me any good because we do a podcast, I couldn't wait to have them all published down the line, because then that'd be basically like a year behind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think I could ever trade weight. I'm too excited to read this stuff when it's fresh, let alone writing reviews. But I genuinely want to read this book on a monthly basis because I don't want to go that long. I don't think I can. I don't have the willpower to not read it on a monthly basis.
I'm the same way.
I went out and bought the hard copy of the first issues anyway, because if I'm going to reread it after I've bagged up my regular floppies, I would rather read the hardcover and do that than pull the floppies back out of the bags again and do all that stuff.
This one's going to make for a good collected. I hope they do like a hardback version of it.
Yeah, I mean, they did a hardcover for the first 6 issues, and they're doing a hardcover for the second 12. I haven't heard if they're going to do one with all 12 issues together or not.
It'd be really neat if they did.
Yeah. But bravo to these guys. I thought they did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I would do. How just out of curiosity, and I don't know if you've tracked this or looked at it lately, how well is the Green Lantern doing on their sales?
I think if it's funny because sales right now are down across the board. Green Lantern has been, generally speaking, a top 50 book in the upper half of that list. But sales wise, it's only selling around 35 to 40,000 copies, which doesn't seem like a lot, but in the grand scheme of what the sales are right now, it's doing well.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's always a misnomer because those numbers, they only track what the stores order. So the only metric you have is that. So we don't know what the metric or we don't know what the digital sales are like, and we don't know how the hardcover sales and the eventual trade paperback sales, all that stuff comes together in one set of numbers at the end. And so we don't really have access to all that stuff. And I don't know whether, are stores over ordering? Are they under ordering? It's really hard to say. Yeah,
I'm not sure. I mean, I've always been curious about how that sales fluctuate like that. But then again, when you're DC Comics and every book is Batman, and then you get a couple titles here and there.
Right. Well, I think if you look at the charts, the sales charts, and if you were to pull out the Batman books and the event books, I think Green Lantern is probably their number one seller after that.
Yeah, that would make sense.
It's still selling more than most of the other characters. So if you look at it in perspective from there, it's doing well because it's outselling the other characters. But in terms of raw numbers, to me, 30,000 books a month or 40,000 books a month is not what I would expect out of a Grant Morrison book.
No, I would have thought that numbers would be higher too.
Yeah. But so let's pause again here for a moment and let's come back and let's talk about New York Comic Con.
All right, sounds good, man.
Listen up, Lanterns. It's time you took the oath with Green Lantern John Stewart. In brightest day, in blackest night, don't let the podcast of Oa escape your sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light.
So, Phil, New York Comic Con was last weekend, is the day we're recording this, and there wasn't a whole lot of Green Lantern news stuff coming out of New York City Comic Con. There were some products, and then there was that Predator Green Lantern combo pack that came out for like $50, which I so want, but I'm not willing to spend the kind of money it takes to buy it. People are selling out for like over $100, and it's like when you get down at the end of the day, it's 2 pieces of plastic. Can't do it. I can't spend that much money on 2 action figures. But there was a couple of action figures, or not action figures, excuse me, a couple of statues that were shown. One was by Tweeterhead, which was a classic Hal statue, and that's actually something you can pre-order now. But then the other thing was an XM Studios Hal figure or statue that had this huge construct, and the price for it was over $700.
Oh my god! What the hell is it made out of?
and I had a real hard time with it because when I first saw the original pictures, they kind of teased it in black and white several months ago.
Is that the one with the missiles in the back of them?
That is the one.
Yeah.
And it looked really cool. But then the picture that comes out now, the missiles kind of look cartoony because they're painted this kind of bright green. And I think it's to capture the detail. But looking at it, the way the smoke trails are, and people have commented about it already, it sags. over time, those missiles are going to sag because the support structure is not strong enough to hold them up. And the people who have seen previous pictures of it are noticing that they've already started the sag in the display model they've got. So I was excited about it, but when I looked at the price tag, I'm like, there is no way Mrs. Rumsey's letting me buy in this thing.
Well, what justifies it being $700? How big is the thing?
It's pretty large. It's big because of that big construct, and I love the sculpt on Hal. I love the texture in the green part of the uniform. It looks spectacular from that point of view. But boy, I can't drop $700 on it. And they on their website they now have teaser images for a really good looking Sinestro. It's Sinestro in that Parallax style outfit with a giant creature,
cool.
and then there's one of Jessica Cruz that they're doing. So they're doing,
that'd be nice.
They're doing 3 different Green Lantern statues, but I can't imagine the price. And then the other one that they showed, which I thought was amazing, was a Justice League diorama. And it's the Justice League, the original Justice League attacking Darkseid. And Darkseid is this oversized sculpt. And then you've got the Justice League coming at it from all angles. You've got Wonder Woman with her golden lasso, and you've got a Hal doing a blast right at him, and you've got Aquaman coming at him with a trident. And it just looks so nice. It wasn't painted yet, but I can imagine once it's painted, it's going to look spectacular. But after seeing the $700 price tag on the Hal figure, I hate to even conjecture a guess. What this is going to be. Yeah, right. So yeah, I was showing them to my wife and she goes, "Oh, that's nice, dear." Yeah, I was getting one of those.
Yeah,
and I was reminded I have no room to display anything in my lantern cave is full. I have things that I can't display because I have no room to display them.
Time to move, wife.
Yeah, I was like, I need a bigger. Maybe I should take over the basement.
That's when it becomes a man cave, man. You're going to live into the stereotype.
But it was interesting. But the big thing in terms of news. There was also they're doing a Justice League Dark Apocalypse War animated film, which looks like an adaptation with Justice League Dark in the Darkseid War storyline, because the pictures they showed, you can see Batman on the Metron chair, but there is a image of Hal in the background with the Justice League, so Hal's in it to some extent. Probably
they do really good with their animated features. I'm looking forward to the Red Sun, Superman Red Sun. I've been a big fan of that adaptation of Superman.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that one.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to that one coming out. And I just got Wonder Woman Bloodlines. I haven't watched that one yet. Have you watched The Death and Return of Superman? Maybe not.
I watched them as the 2 individual films. I know they're either coming out with or they've just come out with a version that has both those movies put together.
Yeah. That's really good too.
I haven't seen that, but I saw the 2 individual movies. I have those, and I watched Batman Hush not too long ago. You said you haven't watched Wonder Woman Bloodlines yet?
No, I haven't watched it yet. I heard it was really good though.
I'm interested in it. It looks like it's another telling of the origin. If I got that right.
I don't even know. I just know it popped up on my alert that that was released or whatnot. I knew I was wanting to see it when it come out. I would imagine so. They usually are, though I don't see why they need another version for hers. I mean, her origin story is just as convoluted as everybody else's origin story that gets told and retold over time,
Well, it's about to get more and more convoluted. That's a good segue. One of the things that DC's been talking about is they've been working on this new timeline. And basically the definitive timeline of the DC universe. And it's interesting because they kind of break DC history up till now, broken down into 4 generations. And they talk about Dan Didio had a panel behind him, and it was very blurry imagery, but some fans have done a great job of taking some of the blurrier text and refining it and getting some really good detail out of it. And what we can tell, and I'm going to keep it kind of related to the Green Lantern stuff, but Gen 1 is Wonder Woman. So Wonder Woman is the first superhero in the new DC timeline.
Which would make her the ultimate. Well, I guess she wouldn't be the ultimate founder of the Justice League then, but that would make her the first overall superhero, even beating out Superman. So that would make her the biggest DC superhero.
Yep, that makes her the original DC superhero, and Gen 1 basically has the Justice Society in it, those characters. So you've got a lot of those characters in it versus seeing Batman and Superman proper. You've got Alan Scott there, and all they retire by the end of Gen 1, and then when Gen 2 starts, that's the appearance of Superman and Batman as we know them. They're born and Clark Kent comes to Earth during Gen 1, but you see Superman arrive as Superman in Gen 2, and Gen 2 ends at Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Right, and then it goes up to Gen 15, which is...
Well, then Gen 3 starts right after Crisis and goes through Flashpoint and Blackest Night.
Right. Okay, there you are. So I'm following you along on the timeline here.
And what was interesting to me about Generation 3 was you see how they fit Hal's time as Parallax in there. And according to this new timeline, Hal was Parallax for about a year.
It seemed like it was a lot longer than that.
Yeah. Yeah, it shows about a year between Emerald Twilight and Final Night, which was interesting. And then Gen 4 starts with Flashpoint and War of the Green Lanterns and goes until current publishing history now. What was interesting is the way the timeline's broken out is it's color coded. And so there's colors for different families of characters. And so the green colors were Green Lantern and Green Arrow. But when you look through that entire origin, or that entire timeline, there's no mention of Simon and Jessica in there at all.
No kidding.
Yeah, it mentions Kyle. It shows when Kyle shows up. It talks about Guy, talks about John and Hal and Alan Scott in Gen 1. But there's no mention of Simon and Jessica.
Huh. I wonder why. I wonder if they'll exist. Well, I mean, I guess it all depends on what this whole 5G concept is consisting of.
Well, that's the thing is apparently, they're teasing this Generation 5, and the rumors that are flying out there, and I'm sure people have seen them, is, Luke Fox is going to become Batman and John Kent is going to become Superman, and that supposedly, according to the rumor mill, every one of the DC characters is going to be replaced by a different and unique version for Generation 5. And that there's going to be some kind of a crisis or some kind of an event that's going to be the dividing line between Gen 4 and Gen 5. And whether that timeline is running concurrent or whether it takes place somewhere down the future, and DC could print Generation 4 stories and Generation 5 stories at the same time, that's what remains to be seen. And there were some things that Dan Didio said when talking about Generation 1 and 2 that he was like, well, I've never read these stories before, wink, wink. So it almost implied that DC is going to be taking and maybe making new stories in all these different generations, or at least in some of them, either through a new series or special miniseries, or, that these timelines are going to be open for creators to go back and explore. So if they want to do something from the Golden Age era during Gen 1, they know here's this basic framework of that generation, and now you can create within that creative space.
Well, not only that, they can expand it further and create it in that different space, and then move outside. This is going to be thinking way outside the box, but move outside the box even further with multiversity, especially when you have multiple Earths.
Right. So, I don't know where it's really going. I mean, it's all rumor at this point, and rumor and conjecture. But, if I'm not sure how I feel about them basically saying, well, Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and Green Lantern and Flash and all these characters as we know them now are all going to go away for another generation. I don't think fans in general will buy into that. Some people will. Some people will find it an interesting jumping on point because you're free of all the baggage of continuity of the past. But at the same time, people are going to revolt against it in general. I mean, you saw that kind of happen with Marvel when they started replacing Iron Man and they replaced Thor and those kind of things. Fans kind of revolted against that stuff.
Well, it's the same way it's the same fandom that gets all riled up with the whole Barry Allen, Wally West fiasco,
Right.
No different than the Green Lantern ones, who's better or who deserves to be the one that's in the movie or whatever the case may be. I mean, you're right. I can't see how a mix up of this magnitude would benefit them, but I don't know. I've given up trying to make sense of their decisions here lately.
I think there's a big potential to tick off your fan base to the point at which they walk away, and will the audience that walks away be as big as the audience that might jump in. That's a huge gamble. But if they do things where they're saying that this event takes place an unknown number of years in the future, so you can start a new generation and tell stories about that generation, but at the same time still tell Generation 4 stories, maybe people will be more inclined to give it a shot. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, I think I need to see what's really going to happen. I hate getting wrapped up in conjecture and so on, but there's been so much buzz about this in the last week since this stuff came out that it's hard to ignore.
It really is, because everybody gets really, really hyped up, even at the hint of stuff like this, especially when it has to come to the continuity issue, because I mean, fans just love to pick that stuff apart. It's like buzzards picking away at a piece of meat. It's like, I mean, that's how I always envision fandom when these little tidbits get thrown out there, especially when Didio talks, because he does that stuff on purpose. If you watched him in his interviews and whatnot, I mean, he likes to throw little subtle hints out there here and there, and and just like you said, man, fans pick up on it, and they like to tear it up.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at over Dan Didio's tenure, you had New 52, where we're starting over, and then you had Rebirth. Well, we're kind of starting over again. I think people are kind of tired of that starting over thing, and they just want good stories and with characters that they recognize and enjoy. And I don't know whether these constant reboots and restarts is good for them, but that's my opinion. Some people may like it. I don't know. Me personally, I think New 52 is a really innovative idea, and I think the only thing I thought that they could have done better was to have made it a more connected universe and listen to the fans a little more. What is it that they're looking for? I mean, you can't cater to people and still be creative, but at the same time, you're making a product that people have to buy in order to keep you in business. But even
as I mean, I don't know. I've always kind of imagined this when it comes to these kind of creative differences that exist with WB or with WB in general. I mean, especially when it comes to their decision making on their films and whatnot. I mean, don't you think like you hear enough with your fan base? If you're that connected, you can get a certain temperature or vibe towards how people are going to respond to the decision that you're making. And you'd think that if you watch that or navigate that channel, you would be able to cater to it to where you'd stay away from that red zone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you would think in this day and age with this simultaneous conversation you can have in real time with your audience, that you'd be paying attention to what they like and don't like.
Yeah, I mean, even trolling on Twitter a couple times a day or whatnot on a certain topic, you can kind of gauge the general audience to know enough to know it's like, yeah, so I probably shouldn't do that because a lot of them are saying that's that, or whatever the case may be. I don't know. But then again, creative differences are creative differences, and that's what they're there for. I mean, it's much can be said about the Joker. There's probably a lot of people out there that didn't care for how he was portrayed or how it was nothing like the comic book or how this and this, how this and this. But it's not their creative genius that's behind making something like that for the fans. It's Todd Phillips. It's a product of his imagination.
It's kind of a double-edged sword because if they didn't care, they wouldn't respond.
Right.
So you've got a product or a character that resonates with audiences because they're emotionally invested enough to give a darn about what you're doing with the character. At the same time, negative or otherwise. At the same time, if you can't please everybody because everybody's got different tastes. Look at Green Lantern fandom in general. I mean, you couldn't get a group of 10 Green Lantern fans together and get them all to agree as to who should be the star of the next movie. You couldn't.
You're exactly right. There's no way. Oh, fandom.
Yeah, but part of that is DC's fault, and when it comes to these characters, because if you didn't bring Barry back, you wouldn't have the issue you've got with Wally and Barry fans. If you didn't have 25 Green Lanterns from Earth, you wouldn't have the problem that Green Lantern fans have.
Yeah, well, that's also true too.
But anyway, so rather than stop, let's keep going. We do have one piece of listener feedback. We got an iTunes review, which people often ask me, well, what can I do to help the show out? And one of the things I always say is iTunes reviews, because your placement in iTunes and how you show up in searches is some of it's keyed off of the reviews you have, the number of reviews. So positive reviews and good comments left as written reviews, and as well as doing the star ratings, is really helpful to any show because it helps you show up better. Like if you go to iTunes and you search for Green Lantern and look under podcasts, there are shows that show up that really aren't Green Lantern centric. Sure, you'll find ourselves in Lantern Cast there, but we might be further down. And for somebody who's out there that doesn't know about either one of our shows, when you go to do a search, you may not find us because we may not pop up right away. But the more reviews we get, the more likely we are to be bumped up higher in that search result. But anyway, we got a response, or not a response, but we got a review from Cresto Knowledge, and this was
cool.
This was posted on iTunes on September 16th, and I'll go ahead and read it. It says, "I've been a long time." Parentheses, not as long as some because I'm only 25, Green Lantern fan for much the same reason and you are. Mostly because it is the character's inner strength and not a special ability that get him through situations. My comic book collection didn't start until I saw the cover of Blackest Night issue 48 and was enamored by the designs of the Blue Lantern Corps. I have since acquired most of the Jeff Johns run but lost interest after the Brightest Day arc. Your podcast reignited my passion, and I cannot thank you enough because without you, I would never have found the Bottled Light arc, which focused on my favorite alien species, the Zodarians. Lastly, keep up the good work and stay true to your opinions. Thanks to you, I was able to stop buying after Lights Out and then pick up again with Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps. So, Cresto, thank you. I appreciate it. One of the things that's always been a challenge on our show is we only have so many Green Lantern books to talk about, and we don't have the luxury of necessarily ignoring a book if we don't like it or if we're critical of it. And one of the things that I've always tried to say with our show is that we try to be even-handed. We try to find the positives, but we're also going to be critical of things that we don't like as well. I was talking to my friend Sean Whalen from Raging Bullets not too long ago, and when I was out visiting in his neck of the woods, he and I went out for pizza, and we were talking, and he said, one of the things that he's got the luxury of is that they cover the entire DC universe, so he and his co-host Jim Seguin pick up the things that they're most excited about to talk about. So their podcast is always very, very positive because they're only talking about the books that excite them and that they're interested in talking about, that they got a good reading experience out of. And sometimes they've gotten criticized for being nothing but positive. But again, they're covering the entire DCU and they have the ability to cherry pick what stories they talk about. And he was saying, he didn't envy my position because right now you've got one Green Lantern book. So if you didn't like it, what would you do? If you didn't talk about it because you didn't want to be negative, what would you have to talk about? So,
well, not only that, but even being able to supplement it with Green Lantern related news, which is few and far between these days. So,
right, exactly.
Like you and like me, every once in a while you pick up that little nugget that you hear about. It automatically becomes okay. Well, we should include that in the podcast, or hey, I should make mention of that because that's going to be interesting. And it just so happens to be Green Lantern. But we don't have the ability where every we turn around the corner, there's a Batman symbol, or one of his rogues, or the Joker for that matter. And, it's like, yeah, he's not wrong. I mean, I think we like it because it doesn't matter who writes it. And it doesn't matter who draws Green Lantern and it doesn't matter who colors it. I'm always going to like it because it is Green Lantern. But I will be critical of the things that I'm entitled to be critical about, like as far as the narrative goes or the story arcs that I don't care for, or some of the artwork that I don't generally find appealing.
Right. I've always looked at I in general don't like movie critics. And so I sometimes wonder, do people view my reviews in the same manner?
Right.
Like I said, I try to be fair about it, and I try to talk about what I like, but I also feel like I have an obligation to talk about what I don't like, because if somebody's not sure if they're going to buy that book or buy that toy or buy that item, that collectible or whatever, if I'm not true, then where's my credibility?
Sure.
And if I don't warn them of something that I personally don't like, and I don't warn them of that, I'm basically allowing them to buy something that they may not like. And not that I'm trying to tell people what to like and what not to like, but like with movie reviewers, if I find a movie reviewer that has the same taste in movies as I do, I'm more apt to have credibility or listen to what they have to say.
Which would make sense.
Right. So I'm trying to look at it as, if you agree with my opinions or like the same things that I like, and you agree with my opinions, then you're going to value my opinion more. If not, well, then find a voice that speaks the same language that you speak and follow them. I hope that, we try to be, like I said, we try to be even handed. And there are things, I remember back when Bill and I were, we had a book a week, and we were talking about Red Lanterns, and there for a while, we neither one of us liked the book. But we felt like, well, we can't ignore the book, but we should at least talk about it. And we can find things in it that are positive. But at the same time, we feel a need to point out some of the things we thought were glaring failures. But, that's kind of the way it goes. It's funny when we talk about the volume of information, because one of my longtime visions and goals was to do a weekly YouTube show that would talk about Green Lantern. It would, I would talk about Green Lantern news and what's going on in the comics, and maybe I'd have a collectible here or there. And I first envisioned it back during the day when we had 5 books a month, and I thought, well, yeah, I could do a weekly show because there's a lot of, Green Lantern was just so popular at that point, but I didn't have the equipment I needed to do YouTube. Well, now that I have the equipment to do the YouTube channel, there's not enough material to support doing a weekly show.
I know, it sucks, man. I wish they had more books out. I wish there was more stuff to read.
Yeah, I hope we get to that point. And the reason why, when we were talking earlier about Green Lantern Corps, is, well, if we don't know what's happening with this whole 5G thing, is DC going to put, if they're going to divide their creative efforts between telling stories over multiple generations, is there room for a Green Lantern Corps book in that? Do they have enough things in it? I mean, who's going to be the Green Lantern in the 5G era if this is really true? Is it going to be Simon and Jessica? Are they going to get pushed to the future? Or is it going to be Teen Lantern?
God. Really? You had to throw that one out there, huh? You could have said Far Sector,
Well, Far Sector's not even in continuity.
Oh, that's true.
But Teen Lantern is, and Brian Michael Bendis, whatever, it seems like whatever he wants to do, he's able to do right now. So would it surprise me at all? Not in the slightest.
No, not really. When you have one of your premier writers is bigger than the DC Comics itself. I mean, what does that say?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm a fan, just like the next person of his. I mean, but there are other writers that I like a lot better than what he does. But that's a different story.
I liked the way he wrote Hal and Batman in the Walmart books that are being reprinted now, I think, as Batman Universe or whatever. I enjoyed that, but other than that, I haven't read anything, and I've bought a few of his books, and I've read a few of them at the comic shop, and I haven't found anything I like. So,
All right.
But anyway, we should be
their own.
Yeah, exactly. So we should be back in a couple weeks. We'll have to do a retro. Maybe we'll do like a retro review, and I know you haven't seen Joker yet, so maybe we'll talk about Joker.
Yes, and as such, the segment will be called the Batman segment of the Green Lantern Corps on the podcast of OA, but it won't be about Batman. It'll be just about Joker.
So we'll have to, maybe we'll do that. And then we'll be back in November with the first issue of Green Lantern Black Stars, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be good. I can't wait for November. Although I can, because I want to get through October and enjoy the fall weather.
Yeah, me too. So we'll be back in a couple weeks. Everybody, take care of each other, keep your power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day.
And we'll talk to you soon.
The Podcast of OA is the official podcast of the blog of OA and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of OA and the Podcast of OA are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted properties.